Today, I want to talk about more about what that looks like when you get that face-to-face meeting and a couple options of how to handle that situation.
Welcome to Facility Maven here on Podbean, a podcast where your questions on facility and cleaning issues are answered by mavens in your field. This podcast is brought to you by FacilityMaven.com, where you can elevate your career with facility and cleaning supplies. Hello, everyone. This is Dave Thompson. I am your host here on this podcast. I am also the director of the Academy of Cleaning Excellence. And you may have heard some of our previous podcasts here lately. We've been talking about facilities management in school districts, it seems like. We'll get to some other different facilities eventually with some of our guests. But Mike Ward was gracious enough to be on a previous podcast, and we're going to tap him again for a little bit more insight. Communication was his big thing on the agenda. So, Mike, what's on our podcast agenda for today? Not communication again.
Well, kind of, but not really. So a different part of that communication. So we talked about the last time about putting a survey together where you can get feedback and communication from your building principal or site supervisor. Today, I want to talk about more about what that looks like when you get that face-to-face meeting and a couple options of how to handle that situation.
Well, I'd say let's tell everybody, if they haven't listened to the podcast before, where you're from and why they're listening to you today, and then just get right into it. And I'm sure they've heard enough of me. They don't want to hear me. They want to hear you.
So I've been doing this for 31 years. That's more than half my life now that I just think of that. So, I've predominantly been in custodial, and more recently I've taken on a role where I'm over maintenance and field services grounds, which is kind of new to me because I haven't been over that in particular, but I've been around it for, like I said, 31 years. So I kind of know how things work. And at the end of the day, it's about, communication, building relationships, knowing people, knowing what people want, and being able to deliver it for our students and staff. So it's pretty much that simple. I did talk about, that survey again and how you can, use that survey prior to your face-to-face meeting with the principal. So I like to do a short, and I stress the word short. You don't want no long survey, just to kind of get a feel for the temperature of your principal or building manager, to just see how they're feeling about what service we provide to them, and then what I need to do to give them the information to understand what we do and how we do it, and those types of things. So I've had it happen where I've set up those meetings, and it's been kind of two ways it works out. Sometimes I just go in, kind of share with them what we do as an overview, I guess you would say, of the department, what we do, the specific trades. A lot of times I'll take people from our trades with me to these meetings. I might take a plumber, a grounds tech, or whatever, especially if there's some concern with, our level of service there, so they can explain to the principal face-to-face kind of what we do and how frequently we do things. I think I talked in my last podcast about one of the questions being, how would you rate our work order system? And, when I got in there, the principal, he rated it as needs improvement, his knowledge of it. And then when I got in there, after 2 clicks, I showed him how easy it was to get on and get real-time information. And he was like, oh, this is easy. This is great. And he just totally changed his view of it. And he was super happy about it. And so anyway, when I get in there with the principals, again, I give them the overview of the department, and then, a quick update on the work order system. And then I share with them what I keep is a spreadsheet, which is not anything amazing. It's just, it's important that they understand that we know, we really care and know what's going on in their building. So I show them so I have a tab for each building, and I show them, here's the tab for your building under custodial. we have this going on. I know you have one nighttime vacancy. We've interviewed for that position. Our status is we're waiting on the background check. Then maintenance, we know that we're having problems with a, HVAC unit in the 100 wing. The parts are on order, grounds, we know we've got some potholes in the parking lot. We will be working on those this summer, and then building improvements, and then upcoming projects like in the summer, capital improvement projects and those types of things. And this is where that conversation really starts heating up a little bit, because what happens is they start telling me things about the building that they're concerned about that maybe we don't even know about. I was just in a meeting with a principal last week, and she was telling me about the wall that divided the cafeteria and the gym. And she's like, oh yeah, this wall's bowing and it's off track and da 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 da. And we went in and looked at it. I was like, oh my gosh, I wish we would have known this sooner. So it's just, it opens up that dialogue. And then, then again, I go back to, we start building relationship through these conversations. Um, and then another way that I do these meetings, sometimes I won't use surveys. I'll just set up a meeting and we'll do a building walk with the principal. I'll have the principal, one plumber, one electrician, one carpenter, an HVAC tech, and of course the head custodian. And we just walk the building. We review what open work orders there are, and those types of things. But man, when you walk the building with the principal and they start pointing out things, and then you point out things to them, they're like, wow, you guys are definitely professionals. You've got your act together, and the whole aura just changes. And naturally, once you're done with whichever platform you use, whether that's in person, just a meeting after a survey, or a walk, or a combination of both, the most important part is when you identify things need to be done, you have to communicate back with them the status of those things. That's where you can fail in those two situations. If you just do those, say you're going to take care of these things or point out things and nothing changes, then you wasted your time. So it's real important.
So it's like you have meetings, and from what you've explained today is that, Mike, it's a one-on-one meetings that ultimately need to result in a personal walkthrough every time, or
It could. And sometimes, a lot of times, Dave, it's the age of the building. Believe it or not, the newer buildings, we get a lot of situations because things that were not done correctly or missed, and it's the older buildings. If a building's been there about 10 to 20 years, it's usually not as bad. But those new buildings and older buildings seem to resonate a lot of discussions of things that need to be repaired and fixed. So
you think that's because as a new building, everybody expects everything to be perfect, and it's all the nitpicky little things?
Oh yeah, for sure. And to be honest, there's some shoddy work that, okay, we got to make sure we get that repaired within the warranty time frame, or we're stuck with it. So we're going to make sure.
So then you have the other side of that flip coin, that it's been neglected.
Right. It can, yes, for years. So yeah, we see that all the time, but I don't think a lot of those things really come to fruition if you don't take that time to at least once a year. I recommend doing this. This ain't something we do a lot. We just do it once a year, unless the principal wants to do it more, that come to light when you spend that half hour to an hour. It just changes the game.
So then I have to ask a question, Mike. Is a half an hour to an hour enough whenever you're talking about recognizing things that need to be looked at?
Usually, especially the elementaries, for sure. And even sometimes with the middle schools, because believe me, when you go, they know what they want to show you. They're not like waiting for you to point it out to them. They're ready to point it out to you. So, and what's cool is when we can point out things to them that they don't realize. And so yeah. And, there's been times it's taken a couple hours. There's been a few times it's taken like a half a day. And a lot of that depends on the principal too. Sometimes you have principals that just want to get through it, and other principals that really care and they want to understand every aspect of their school, from the students all the way to the nuts and bolts that hold it together.
So the personal meetings work along with communication? So would you say that these are hand in glove, or these are 1, 2, 3? How would you, to somebody that's new like you, that's just getting started, what would you say the importance levels would be?
I'd say it's very high, because if you don't know your customer, you're in trouble. Whether they're good or bad, it doesn't matter. You still got to know what makes them tick. And if you don't take the time to get to know them, and it's working great for me, because like I'm new to this district I'm at now, so I don't know these people at all. And you hear people firing off names, and you're like, okay, who's that? What building are they at? I mean, this is like speaking in Chinese or something. I just don't know what they're saying. So it's been a huge help for me. And so, yeah.
Folks, that every time that we do a podcast, I might wonder, why do I need to listen to a podcast? Well, if this is something new, like Mike is saying here to you, what would you also say to a seasoned facilities manager that may be listening to the podcast? Do you think this has the same importance level to them as to you because you're new?
Absolutely. Just real quick, back to the surveys. So if you're truly trying to improve your relationships with your schools, whether you've been doing this for a year or 20 years, one of the ways you can rate your surveys, I usually use, excellent, good, fair, needs improvement. But you can do a 1 through 5, with 5 being the best. So when you have your yearly meeting with that principal, let's say you've been doing this for 15, 20 years, and one of your categories is rated a 3, and it's not great, it's kind of in the middle. So then I can say to the principal, what do I need to do to get this to a 4 or 5? What are we missing here that we're not getting this at a higher level? And again, that has no bearing on how long a facilities or maintenance manager's been in a job. There's always room for improvement. And another thing that happens, Dave, is principals change. So
I was just thinking that. That's what I was going to say, Mike. Is what? I'll bet you that facility manager listening to this says, "Gosh, you have no idea how many principals I've trained."
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at a big school district like Denver Public Schools. When I worked there, I mean, man, good luck knowing 175 principals. So.
And how often do those principals change in a given year?
A lot. And something else that happens, and like right now I'm in the Columbus, Ohio area. A lot of times principals from the Columbus public schools will come to other school districts, the suburbs of Columbus, and they'll move back and forth, from school districts. So, it's a weird dynamic.
And I was just thinking, here at the Academy, we're all about learning and education. And, I wrote a piece here and I said, it's like a consumable. It's used all the time, needed all the time, and ever changing.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's what you're saying here today on this podcast, is that, we're always constantly doing this. This isn't a one and done thing.
Yep. And you're never done with customer service. And if you think you are, you're making a mistake.
So, folks, I've got a feeling that the next time that we have Mike on the air with us talking about facility maintenance, customer service might be a topic of consideration.
Absolutely.
We'll have to find out, because I'm sure you'll come back again, Mike.
Oh, yeah, if you're nice to me. No, I'm kidding.
Well, folks, I guess I've got to be nice to Mike Ward, or he's not going to come back. So hopefully you learned something today, folks. We appreciate your time. Mike, any parting words before we end this podcast?
Nope, just keep your chin up and give your best every day. You'll never go wrong if you do that.
Folks, you may have heard before, Mike has been doing this as some time. He was born in the Ohio area, not too far from where you're currently at, from what I understand.
That's correct.
And so, what we always say here on the podcast, folks, is it's not exactly where you were born. We all have to start somewhere. It's not actually where you're going to end up, because we don't know where that is yet. It's the journey in between. Our advice is make sure that journey is healthy, positive, and proactive. And until we talk again, make sure that you can follow those words. Mike, it's been great having you on the show again, and we look forward to the next one. Maybe, folks, it might be customer service, but we don't know yet.
Thanks, Dave.